It is 11 o'clock. Welcome back to Tonight Live. I'm Dan Wootton, and it's now time for Uncancelled. This is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And today I am delighted to be joined by the star columnist for The Spectator and author Lionel Shriver. She has, of course, penned 15 books, including the film-adapted bestseller We Need to Talk About Kevin, for which she won the Orange Prize for Fiction in 2005. Of course, Lionel is a controversial columnist, and I absolutely loved one of her recent columns where she says she thinks we should give independence to Scotland. So this is what Lionel said. She writes that as karmic vengeance, nothing would seem more fitting than to give Nicola Sturgeon the Scottish independence she claims to crave. It would be simply delicious to watch this previously popular politician maintain the free prescriptions, elder care and university education that her compatriots now view as their birthright, then break the news that Scots themselves have to cover the bill. Lionel added, at my nastiest, I would love to see Scotland struggle to defend itself, have its bid to re-enter the EU vetoed. Autonomy isn't all it's cracked up to be. In Uncancelled now, Lionel joins me live from New York. Lionel, what about Scots who say, that's horrible?
Well, that's sort of the point of the column. It is horrible. The point is that sometimes the meanest thing you can do is to give people what they claim they want. And I do have a mean streak. And when people want something that is fundamentally self-destructive, I'm just dying to give it to them. And I think Scottish independence is a perfectly good example. I mean, the money doesn't add up, and the problems that they would bring on themselves don't add up. You know, you would have the currency problem. You would have the EU claiming that the deficit is way too high to qualify for the euro. They'd have the headache of trying to apply to enter the European Union with Spain off to the side saying, no, we don't want to encourage this kind of separatist movement. We veto your membership. I mean, if you're truly cruel, it would be a wonderful spectacle. And this applies to a range of other issues, especially Northern Ireland. I mean, a really mean side of me wants to see a united Ireland. I mean, it may make a certain amount of geographical sense, but it doesn't make a lot of economic sense, especially for the Republic of Ireland, because Northern Ireland is, look, I lived there for 12 years. It's a lovely place. The people are great. So not doing down Ulster here, but it's expensive. If the people in the Republic are asked if they want a united Ireland, a majority say yes. But when you start qualifying, well, do you want a united Ireland if you have to pay for it, if you have to cover the deficit? Only 1 in 8 Irish people want a united Ireland if they have to pay for it. And I find that hysterical because, excuse me, under what circumstances would you not have to pay for it? I mean, who else is going to pick up the tab? So I like to fantasize about having that kind of unrealistic romanticism sent up just by giving people what they claim to want.
I'm totally in love with your mind, Lionel Shriver. I think you're absolutely incredible the way that you think. What's really interesting in this column is you say that in a YouGov poll a year ago, 35% of the English support full English independence, including 49% of Tory voters. And actually, you think it could be good for England independence.
Why wouldn't it be? I mean, first off, 84% of the population of the UK live in England. So basically you get most of the country. And it's the most prosperous part of the country. It's the people who are paying for Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. So clearly, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland would be much worse off, and we in England would be much better off. I think, actually, I'm surprised there isn't a stronger movement for English independence than there is. The English have been very tolerant as taxpayers of the amount of money that goes from their pockets into the other nations in Northern Ireland, and don't often express much resentment, rather to my surprise. And meanwhile, on the English taxpayers' dime, Nicola Sturgeon is able to offer all these freebies to her people without those people actually having to pay for it. And it's transparently unfair.
So when you hear Westminster insiders, you know, the usual suspects, say, as they always do, if Boris Johnson were to fail to keep the union together, he's failed as a Prime Minister. Do you disagree with that?
I violently disagree with that. Actually, we're setting ourselves up for that situation just by saying it all the time. But it's worth questioning. Why is England so much weaker without dependent states? I mean, it's true that it would reduce the landmass of the country somewhat, but how much does that matter? How much does that translate into political and economic power? I mean, I would see a different rhetoric in the Tory party. It's like, maybe just say, go ahead, right? Okay, you want independence? Well, go ahead. A huge number of people in England are perfectly happy to see Scotland go independent. And there's no reason to frame the argument constantly as if, should independence go through on a referendum, this is a terrible loss, this is a political catastrophe. It isn't necessarily. The actual people of England might be just fine with it. The people who are going to suffer, and that's where my reservation is, are the residents of Scotland. And they will be poorer, and they will have a lot of problems that they don't have right now.
Are you not sentimental about our shared history?
Of course, I confess that I am an American and I don't have the same emotional relationship to the Union. I have strong feelings about the Union in Northern Ireland just because I can't bear the IRA and those people, and I don't especially like seeing them get their way. I certainly didn't want to see them get their way through violence. But honestly, if there were a border poll in Northern Ireland and it did go for a united Ireland, I have no problem with that. My initial problem with the idea of united Ireland by force was that it was anti-democratic. If that came about by peaceful democratic means, that's fine with me.
Do you actually believe that Nicola...
I am not sentimental about the Union.
Okay. Just coming to Nicola Sturgeon, do you actually believe, Lionel, that she wants independence?
I think it's definitely worth questioning whether she wants it. She certainly wants to be the champion of it, but she's in a much better position if she doesn't get what she wants. Then she has a purpose in perpetuity. If there is no referendum, you know, if the referendum is denied, then she can be indignant and unite her people in outrage. You know, she's got a wonderful position right now. if she were to get independence, she would have one headache after another. And, and also Scotland is pretty evenly divided right now on the issue. And so you'd have the kind of equivalent of a post-Brexit situation with half the country pissed off, frankly. This whole thing of giving people what they want, and I went on record as supporting Brexit. Okay, and I'll take responsibility for that. But the same formula applies. I'm actually sympathetic with Remainers, some of whom said either to each other or to themselves, "Oh, go ahead, let the Brexiteers have what they claim they want. Just see how much they like it."
Well, I have to say, I'm liking it. I'm liking it. I'm liking the fact that we're vaxxed much more than if we'd remained in the EU. Lionel, I've got in the studio with me today Andrew Doyle and Konstantin Kisin. Andrew, what do you make of this thesis from Lionel?
Well, I agree with the point that she makes that if there is a referendum and they vote one way, then they should get what they want. But I think where I part company is my view is that it should be on the principle of self-determination. That's why they should get what they want, not to teach them a lesson, but because I think people should have the right. I mean, if you take Northern Ireland, that was built into the agreement that Margaret Thatcher signed with Dublin in the 80s, the one that caused all the problems with the unionists because she'd obviously ceded some power to the Irish government to have some say in affairs of the North. But the principle was there that the North there would not be a united Ireland without the consent of the majority of the people of Northern Ireland. That strikes me as a sensible thing to happen. And in terms of Scotland, I mean, the only Scottish people I know are largely comedians. It seems to be compulsory in Scotland that if you're a comedian, you have to support Scottish independence. I don't think they'd get gigs if they didn't. But having spoken to a lot of them about this, it isn't about economic inequality. This isn't even crossing their minds. I mean, to take the view that they would be better off, or that they would be worse off with independence, might be true, but they won't care. Because actually, it's a romantic attachment to the ideal of an independent Scotland, much like with Brexit. I mean, the polls told us quite clearly that the majority of people who voted to leave weren't concerned about the possibility they might be poorer. It was actually a bigger principle than that.
Lionel?
I agree. I think there's a good parallel, an ironic parallel, considering that independence has been given such a boost by the Leave vote. But, I mean, yes, I am not opposed to self-determination, and if I were Scottish, I'd probably choose to stay in the Union out of selfish reasons. I think I would probably be more prosperous in being part of the Union, but I'm actually fine with people suiting themselves. And if the majority of Scotland wants to leave, they should leave.
Konstantin, what do you think?
Well, I lived in Scotland for many years, and I'm going to do my best impression of Keir Starmer here. Sit on the fence. I can see both sides. As I say, my wife and I loved living in Scotland. We moved down south not too long ago for the sun and salad. But we're here now. And look, I can see both sides. And Andrew makes a good point. I think the economic argument isn't necessarily that persuasive to people. And, I used to joke for a long time that saying to somebody, well, you should stay in the union because you'll be better off economically, is kind of like saying another man should sleep with your wife because they'd be better at it. It's not that persuasive, right? But I also, I think the point that I think we've missed so far is that there was a referendum. I lived in Scotland at the time of the last referendum, and the promise,
once in a generation referendum.
And that was the promise, Dan, wasn't it? It was the once in a generation. And I think I disagree with Lionel completely, by the way. I don't think Nicola Sturgeon is using this as a cynical thing to advance her career. I do genuinely think she believes it, having followed her career from a fairly young age in politics.
Oh,
but
no, you misunderstood me.
Okay.
No, I'm not saying that she's cynical. I do believe that she believes in independence. But I'm saying that politically she's in a better position not getting it.
I see. Well, I stand corrected. I guess what I'm saying is I think she believes it very strongly. And I think where she has been perhaps a little bit cynical, and I'm not sure you'd agree with me on this, is I think the issue of Brexit gave her an opportunity to say, well, we need to have another referendum, we need to do this again because the circumstances have changed, having initially promised that this would be a once in a generation thing. And I think that's where the real issue is. I personally don't want to particularly take a side. I can see both sides, but I think the issue of the fact that we've had a referendum is quite important here.
Dominique Samuels, what do you make of Lionel's argument?
Well, I mean, my whole stance on Scottish referendum, I think that I'm quite balanced in a way that I think if there's a genuine appetite for Scottish independence, then there should obviously be a referendum. But the thing is, it's not been fully established as to whether or not there is an actual appetite to have another referendum, or whether Scots actually do want to depart from the UK. And I don't think that electoral support in itself for the SNP is a signal that Scots want independence, because a lot of the time people vote for the SNP as a way to keep Westminster on their toes and in check, and to make them acknowledge Scotland continuously throughout, political life. I don't think that's necessarily a signal that Scots do want independence, and that's the only way it could possibly happen.
No, indeed. Lionel, I just have to ask you quickly before we go. You got back to New York. You wrote about it in a fascinating column in this week's Spectator, and I share your fear that we might be seeing the end of air travel as we used to know it. It sounds like the whole process was a complete nightmare.
Well, you have to really want to go somewhere right now. It's unpleasant. And it's complicated. And I'm perfectly sympathetic with people who cannot be bothered. And if we want to have a viable aviation industry in the UK, we have to start making it easier. Most of all, we have to at least make it easier for vaccinated travelers. And that is not just, as the government is now finally considering, letting you skip this odious quarantine, but also skipping the tests. They're extremely expensive, they're tiresome, and they're pointless if you're already vaccinated.
No, indeed. Lionel Shriver, absolute pleasure to have you here. Please do come back.